My name is Mimi Hudson, and my research is on the underdiagnosis rate of diabetes and its associated factors in older adults in Mexico, China, and South Africa. And this research was done in conjunction with Alicia DeLuise and Josh Snodgrass, the head of the Biomarkers lab in the Department of Anthropology. And so the reason that I decided to do this research is because underdiagnosis of diabetes is a large problem in a lot of parts of the world, despite the negative effects it has on health, such as cardiovascular disease, a potentially blindness, and potentially amputation of limbs. And so previous studies that have been done on diabetes have shown that there's an increasing rate of type 2 diabetes globally, and those increasing rates are closely related to changes in lifestyle and socioeconomic status. But what those other studies fail to report is the underdiagnosis rate of diabetes. And so the underdiagnosis rate is basically the rate of self-reported diagnosis compared to actual diabetes that has been diagnosed clearly. And so underdiagnosis is rarely reported just because there's a need for multiple measures, and the measures are a blood biomarker, such as glucose or glycated hemoglobin or HbA1c, and also self-report measures. And so the objective for this study was to describe the rate of actual diabetes compared to self-reported diabetes diagnosis among older adults in 3 middle-income countries, which was Mexico, China, and South Africa, using data from the World Health Organization's study on global aging and adult health. And the hypothesis was that the underdiagnosis of diabetes would be associated with being male, being unmarried, being less satisfied with healthcare, and having lower wealth and decreased physical functioning. And so the methods of this study we used variables that were collected following stage procedures that's outlined in the Kowal et al. Paper, which is referenced in the references section. And so basically we used HbA1c measures from dried blood spots, and those were analyzed in the countries separately. And then we also have a description of physical functioning, and that was in the last 30 days. How much difficulty did you have walking 100 meters? And so we compared the HbA1c variable with the question of, do you have diabetes? And so what the results found was that 7% in China, 10% in Mexico, and 77% in South Africa had diabetes that was not diagnosed. So that means that their HbA1c was high enough to recognize that there was diabetes, but they did not report having diabetes. And so the people who did have diagnosed diabetes, who had a high HbA1c and reported having diabetes, indicated that the last time they needed healthcare, they received healthcare. And so in all 3 of the countries, people that had diabetes without a diagnosis were more likely to rate their health as better than people with diabetes and a diagnosis. So basically those who had undiagnosed diabetes were perceiving their health as being okay, and that's most likely why they did not receive health care. And so as shown in table 1, the underdiagnosis was associated with being male in South Africa, but not China or Mexico, and was associated with having less wealth or a lower socioeconomic status in China and South Africa, but not Mexico. And so the conclusions of this study was that the actual rate of diabetes is much greater in Mexico, China, and particularly in South Africa with 77%. And this shows us that underdiagnosis of diabetes, as mentioned earlier, was associated with being male in South Africa and having lower wealth or socioeconomic status in China and South Africa. Contrary to the hypothesis, marriage, physical functioning, and healthcare satisfaction were not related to the diagnosis. And a main takeaway was that health in those with undiagnosed diabetes could rapidly decline if no healthcare services are utilized, but those who had undiagnosed diabetes but were otherwise healthy were not utilizing healthcare services due to them reporting their health being okay. And so the main reason that this research is important is because, as mentioned in the beginning, undiagnosed diabetes, if remained untreated, can lead to blindness, amputation, cardiovascular disease, and a wide array of other diseases. And so it's really important that health is being checked up on, even if it's perceived as being okay. And so to close things up, I'd like to thank the participants of the study, the PIs of the study, the statistician of the study, and all those listed in the Kowal et al. Paper. And I'd also like to thank Josh Snodgrass and Alicia DeLuise with significantly helping me with this research. And thank you for listening.